Hello grade 12s. Today's lesson is about the endocrine system. It follows the grade 12 life science CAP syllabus. And I just really want to talk briefly about what the endocrine system is. So the endocrine system comprises of endocrine glands. So it's made up of glands that secrete hormones into the blood. And it's a way for the body to respond to the environment. So we have two ways of responding to the environment. The first one is the nervous system, where you pick up a stimulus and then impulses are sent so that your body can do a movement or something to react to the stimulus in the environment. Whereas the endocrine system uses glands and hormones that are secreted into the blood, which are then sent to specific target organs to also react to a stimulus that's in the environment. So the endocrine system is a way that the human body responds to the environment. As always, the department's guidelines are here and everything in the PowerPoint answers the guidelines. So now we get to the difference between exocrine and endocrine glands. Exo, we think of outside, exits, you exit a building, you go outside of a building. Endo, we think of into. And when this becomes relevant is, let me just get this laser out, is here, where the exocrine glands pour their secretions outside of the bloodstream, and the endocrine glands pour their secretions into the bloodstream. So endo, into the bloodstream. The exocrine glands transport their secretions via ducts, so it contains ducts. Endocrine glands don't use ducts, they use the bloodstream, so they are ductless. Exocrine glands secrete enzymes, whereas endocrine glands secrete hormones. Exocrine glands pour their secretions into glands, whereas endocrine glands pour their secretions into the blood. And then exocrine glands are located nearby the site of action, whereas endocrine glands are located away from the site of action. And why this is the way it is because ducts are only so long. So these glands need to be near the site of action where they want their secretions to be because they are being transported via ducts. But with the endocrine glands, they are being transported through the bloodstream, and the blood flows throughout the entire body. So it can be located away from the site of action, very far away in the body, because it's being transported into the bloodstream, which travels everywhere in the body. So at some point, that hormone will reach the specific target organ. Okay, so now we get to the definition of a hormone. So a hormone is an organic chemical messenger that is secreted directly into the bloodstream by an endocrine gland, causing a target organ to perform a specific function. Now this is a mouthful. It's like one of the longest definitions ever. But if you break it down, it is an organic chemical messenger. Chemical, it has a chemical property, okay? It is chemicals, made up of chemicals. Messenger, it carries a message, okay? So it is a chemical substance that is carrying a message. And how does it carry a message? Through the bloodstream, because it is secreted into the bloodstream by an endocrine gland. So exocrine glands are not secreting hormones, only endocrine glands are secreting hormones. And then it causes a target organ to perform a specific function. So it is secreted into the bloodstream, which means it can travel to this target organ to perform a specific function. So then we just have a look at the different kinds of endocrine glands that we get. So from the top, we have the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, which are situated in the brain. Then we have the thyroid gland, which is around your neck area. We have the pancreas, which sits just underneath your stomach. And then we have the adrenal glands. There are two of them on each side. They are situated on top of the kidneys. And then the ovaries and the testes. Okay, so those are the endocrine glands, and then each of these have a specific hormone that they secrete. Some glands have multiple hormones that they secrete, and each of those hormones have a different target organ, and that is what we are going to get into now. So the first endocrine gland that we look at is the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus secretes ADH, antidiuretic hormone. And the function of this hormone is it promotes the reabsorption of water by affecting the permeability of the kidney. So if you think back to grade 11, you did the nephron, and there was the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus. So there were two parts where water could be reabsorbed, in the distal convoluted tubule and in the collecting duct. And what ADH does is it goes to those cells of the kidney, there in the nephron, and it makes the cells more permeable to water. So water can be absorbed out of that tubule or that collecting duct back into the bloodstream. And this will make your urine more concentrated because there's not a lot of water now in the urine that is diluting it. And this occurs when someone is dehydrated. So we need to try and get as much water back into the bloodstream so that this person doesn't dehydrate. So yeah, this is a mechanism that prevents dehydration by reabsorbing the water back into the bloodstream. Then the next endocrine gland that we get to is the pituitary gland. And this one, as you can see, secretes lots of hormones. So it secretes, number one, the growth hormone, the follicle stimulating hormone, the luteinizing hormone, and those two should ring a bell, the FSH and LH from chapter 4, where we did the reproductive system. Then it also secretes thyroid stimulating hormone and prolactin. Okay, so let's go one by one. The growth hormone. It promotes the growth of all the skeletal muscles. So skeletal muscles, you have different kinds of muscles. You get the skeletal muscles, visceral muscles, and cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is obviously for your heart. Visceral or smooth muscle is for your internal organs and your blood vessels. And then skeletal muscles are the muscles that allow you to move. It's all of the muscles that are attached to your skeleton, so to your bones. And the growth hormone promotes the growth of all of these skeletal muscles. So if you have too much growth hormone, you get a condition called gigantism. So these people are just overly big. Their muscles are too stimulated. The growth of their muscles is too stimulated that they become really big. But the opposite of that would be dwarfism, where these people have really small skeletal muscles because there's not enough growth hormone to promote the growth of those muscles. Then we get the follicle stimulating hormone, and you should already know the function of this hormone. It promotes the development of a follicle into a mature Graafian follicle in the ovaries. Okay, and then the luteinizing hormone goes hand in hand with the follicle stimulating hormone. It then converts the ruptured Graafian follicle into a corpus luteum. It also causes the Graafian follicle to release the ovum, and it stimulates the Graafian follicle to secrete estrogen. Then thyroid stimulating hormone promotes the growth of the thyroid gland and the secretion of thyroxine. So thyroxine is secreted by the thyroid gland, which is another endocrine gland that we look at. And the first messenger is the thyroid stimulating hormone. So if the pituitary gland doesn't secrete thyroid stimulating hormone, then thyroxine cannot be secreted by the thyroid gland. So the first message that must be sent is thyroid stimulating hormone to the thyroid gland, and then the second message, which will be thyroxine, can be then secreted. So the one can't occur without the other. And then prolactin is the last one, and this is what stimulates pregnant mothers to secrete milk. So it stimulates the mammary glands in the breasts to secrete milk so that mothers can breastfeed. So we just spoke about the thyroid gland in the previous slide, and we said that the thyroid gland secretes thyroxine. And the function of thyroxine is it controls energy production and the basal metabolic rates of all cells. And it also regulates the growth and development of the heart and nervous systems. Okay, so the next one we look at is the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland secretes two hormones, and these glands are situated on top of the kidneys. It secretes two hormones. Both these hormones' names start with A. So it's easy to remember. Adrenal gland secretes aldosterone and adrenaline. And adrenaline sounds very similar to adrenal. It's adrenal with an I and an N. Okay. If we look at aldosterone, aldosterone works hand in hand with ADH that we spoke about that the hypothalamus secretes, antidiuretic hormone. And it does this by regulating the amount of salt in the blood. So something that you can remember is that where the salt goes, the water flows. So salt and water have this very interdependent and interrelated relationship, okay? So if you have a lot of salt outside the nephron in the kidney, water is going to flow out of those into the area where the salt is, into the bloodstream. And that's how it reabsorbs the water from the nephron. If there's very little salt there, then it's not as much water will be absorbed out of the nephron. So in this way, aldosterone assists ADH to regulate the water in the blood. Okay, those are the functions of aldosterone. Then we look at the functions of adrenaline. So adrenaline is your fight or flight hormone. And why it is called this is because it prepares your body for an emergency by doing a bunch of different things in the body. It causes a whole system and network of different actions to take place in your body to prepare yourself for this emergency situation. So the main thing adrenaline tries to do is it tries to supply the body with extra energy, because obviously in an emergency situation you need lots of energy to either fight someone who's trying to attack you or to flee the situation and try run away from them as fast as possible to keep yourself safe. So adrenaline is the hormone in your body that tries to keep yourself safe by preparing you for an emergency situation. And obviously this takes a lot of energy. So there's a number of steps that the body undergoes to produce this energy. If we think back to grade 11, there's aerobic respiration, cellular respiration, and the whole point of that was to produce energy, to give the body energy. Okay, and two vital necessary prerequisites in this whole system was number 1, glucose, and number 2, oxygen. Okay, so our body tries to get those molecules, oxygen and glucose, into our bloodstreams so that it can go via the bloodstream to the target organs. And our target organs are going to be the brain, so that we can think quickly, be quick on our feet, react to the situation very quickly, because this is an emergency, we need to think quickly. Number 2, it tries to go to the heart to increase your heart rate, to get the blood to the target organs a lot quicker. Number 3, your muscles, your skeletal muscles, you need to run quickly. So your muscles in your legs need to be very activated. They need to have a lot of energy. Or you need to fight and punch this person, then the muscles in your arms need to be very active and have a lot of energy. And the 4th target organ are your eyes. Well, the 4th target organ is your eyes. So why do your eyes need to be activated? Because you need to be very alert. Your eyes need to be wide open so that you can see anything that is coming towards you and react quickly to it. Okay, so number 1, increase energy. Number 2, send the molecules that help increase energy to the correct target organs. Okay, so let's start. Number 1, it increases breathing and oxygen intake. Why would it increase the breathing rate? So that we can increase the amount of oxygen taken into our bodies. And we need the oxygen for cellular respiration, because we said it's one of the prerequisites for cellular respiration. And cellular respiration produces energy by breaking down ATP into ADP and P, which is a phosphate group. Okay. Then we also need glucose for cellular respiration. So it speeds up the conversion of glycogen in the liver to glucose in the presence of glucagon. So glucagon is another hormone that we're going to speak about in the next slide. It is secreted by the pancreas. But in our bodies, from the foods that we eat, we get glucose. But we can't just keep this glucose in our bloodstream, because our bodies need the glucose, our cells need the glucose for energy. So insulin, which is now touching and stepping on the toes of the next slide, insulin helps those cells absorb the glucose, and then it converts it into glycogen. So glycogen is the stored form of glucose in our liver cells and muscle cells. But now we obviously need glucose in our bloodstream so that it can be transported to the organs that we actually need it in. We don't need glucose at the liver because the liver isn't really taking place in this whole system. The liver isn't going to help you in any way in fighting or fleeing the situation. We need the glucose by our brains, by our hearts, by our muscles, and by our eyes. Okay. Then we now have the glucose in our bloodstream and we have the oxygen in our bloodstream. So then our heart rate increases and our blood pressure increases so that the blood with the oxygen and the glucose and thyroxine can reach our target organs more quickly. And then another way the body helps the blood reach the target organs more quickly is by dilating the blood vessels to the target organ specifically. It doesn't just dilate the blood vessels of the whole body. Can't do that. We have to only dilate the blood vessels to the places that we need them. We need the blood, we need those molecules, the oxygen, the glucose, and the thyroxine. Okay. So dilating, it means that the diameter of the blood vessel is increasing. Then it constricts the blood vessels to the skin and the digestive system to supply them with less blood. We don't need the blood by our skin and our digestive system right now. If you just ate a meal, your body's going to be like, no, let's stop digesting this food. We don't need to digest this food right now. We need to run away. So we're going to send all of the energy to our legs so that we can run, so that those muscles are active. And that's also why people become very pale in stressful situations, because the blood vessels to the skin are constricted. So less blood is going to the skin, which means you become more pale. Another thing the body does is it increases the metabolic rate in muscles and brain cells to supply them with more energy so that their activity increases. So another thing, the whole thing is just about getting more energy to these target organs. So it does that also by increasing the metabolic rate. So right now we have increasing cellular respiration, which requires oxygen and glucose. Then we must increase the heart rate and blood pressure to get this blood with the oxygen and glucose to our target organs. And it dilates the blood vessels also to help the blood get there quicker. It constricts the blood vessels to the target organ, the organs that aren't the target organs. And then it also increases the metabolic rate in the muscles. Then another thing the body does, so there's a whole list, it also increases the skeletal muscle tone and sweating. Why are we increasing skeletal muscle tone? So that we can run faster, so that we can punch harder, okay? So it's making our muscles bigger. And then it also causes the pupils to dilate. Why? Like I've said, so that your eyes are wide open, you can be very alert and see everything that is coming to you. So now we get to the pancreas, and the pancreas secretes two hormones, and we've mentioned both of those hormones in the previous slide, insulin and glucagon, okay? Insulin's function is it decreases the amount of glucose in the blood. Specifically in the blood, it does not decrease the amount of glucose in the body, it decreases the amount of glucose in the blood by doing three things. Number one, it stimulates respiring cells to absorb glucose. Now, why would respiring cells need glucose? If they are respiring cells, it means that they are undergoing cellular respiration. And one of the requirements for cellular respiration is glucose. Cellular respiration is the breakdown of glucose to release energy. So it stimulates the respiring cells to absorb this glucose. And then these respiring cells utilize the glucose, which is now the second thing. So the utilization of glucose by cells. And obviously cells can only utilize the glucose if they have absorbed the glucose. Okay. Then the third thing it does is it stimulates the conversion of glucose by liver cells and muscles into glycogen. So where glucose is stored is in the liver and the muscle cells, and it is stored in the form of glycogen. And insulin causes these cells to absorb the glucose and then convert it into glycogen. And we have glycogen stored there in case we need it for energy. So if we need energy, let's say I haven't eaten today, my blood glucose has dropped, now I need glucose for my body to function, for cellular respiration to take place so that I can have energy, then the body converts the stored glucose, which is glycogen, back into glucose because glucose is the functional form that that the body can use. So the body can't use glycogen. The body can't do anything with glycogen. It's just the way it is stored. But the body uses glucose for cellular respiration. So we store the glycogen just there. It's sitting in the liver and the muscle cells in case we need it. And when we do need it, the body converts it back into glucose. And the hormone that is used to convert the glycogen back into glucose is glucagon. So now all of these names are getting very similar. We have glucose, which is the functional form of a substance that our body can use for cellular respiration. Then we have glycogen. Glycogen is the stored form of glucose in the muscle cells. And if these cells are using the glucose and absorbing the glucose, it's obviously decreasing the amount of glucose that is in the blood. Because remember, we're not trying to decrease the amount of glucose in the body, we're trying to decrease the amount of glucose in the blood. Okay. And people with diabetes either don't produce insulin or their bodies and their cells aren't reactive to insulin. They don't recognize insulin as a chemical in the body. And therefore, they need to either inject insulin because their bodies aren't producing it. And if they are insensitive to insulin, then they have to take medication for that. Okay, so that is how we decrease the amount of blood glucose by absorbing it into the cells, using it up, the cells use it up, or converting it into glycogen, which is stored in the liver and muscle cells. But now let's say, like I used the example, I haven't eaten today, my body has no energy, there's no glucose in my blood, I need energy so that my cells can undergo cellular respiration. I need glucose so my cells can give me energy. What does the body do? The pancreas secretes glucagon, and then here we can see the function. It increases the amount of glucose in the blood by stimulating the liver and muscle cells to convert the stored glycogen back into glucose, which is then secreted into the blood. So we can summarize the whole pancreas thing like this by this equation. So we have insulin. Okay, we have, oh goodness, why is it okay? Glucose and glycogen. And if we wanted to go this way, we use insulin. And if we wanted to go this way, we use glucagon. Okay, so that sums up the pancreas. Now we have a look at the ovaries. We also discussed these two hormones in the video on human reproduction, but let's just revise. So we have estrogen and progesterone that are both secreted by the ovaries. Estrogen is responsible for the onset of puberty and the development of secondary sexual characteristics, and it also starts the preparation of the uterus for pregnancy by making the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus, thicker, more vascular, and more glandular. Then progesterone inhibits FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, and we had a look at that in one of the previous slides by the pituitary gland. It also ensures the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus, is fully developed for implantation. And then it also ensures that the endometrium is maintained during pregnancy. So it ensures that the endometrium does not start shedding, such as in menstruation. So it ensures that the endometrium stays attached to the uterus during pregnancy, because if the endometrium is not maintained, then it will result in a miscarriage. Now we have a look at the testes, We also dealt with this hormone in the video of human reproduction, but let's just also revise and recap this one. So testosterone, it controls the development of the male sex organs and secondary sexual characteristics. If you are new to the channel, I'd just like to inform you that you can request any 3 PowerPoints of your choice by emailing grade 12 revision@gmail.com and listing the 3 PowerPoints that you'd like. And the only requirement is you must send in a screenshot of your subscription to the channel. And then on this slide, I just put in the diagram so you can practice labeling the endocrine glands. You can also practice naming the hormones that are secreted by those endocrine glands, and then practice the functions of each hormone. Good luck, grade 12s.